as we take a look at movement. I mean, this is this topic. Obviously, I think the purpose and the reason for some of the questions on it is, what's the target? How do you start with it? Where do you start with it? What's the way that you approach it? And I think obviously there's a lot of stuff out there, really high-end stuff, 3D motion capture, force plate stuff, super simple stuff, maybe like FMS or SFMA, super non-technology, a little simpler version of stuff. So let's talk about what we do and what we do, what we found to have a lot of consistency with, and things that we use clinically. We've definitely built a model around using movement as a foundational tool for us. So we do use many of these tools, many of these tests, and let's kind of describe how we use it so that you guys can listen to a perspective on how we found to use it over the years, that I think has been really super efficient. At the end of the day, I mean, I think you can get really lost and getting pulled in many different directions here. So let's talk about what we do and why we kind of do what we do. So who wants to run with that?
I think first off, there's no wrong or right way. I think most people can hopefully accept that it's ultimately whatever gives you yourself, the clinician or your team, the right information to make the right choice. And so with that, we've kind of identified the SFMA, or Selective Functional Movement Assessment process, to kind of align with our treatment strategies. And so the SFMA offers up a nicely laid out algorithm of looking at top tier movement patterns that most people should be able to do. And then if there's any deficiencies, it really dives deep into deciding whether this is something you should attack on the table, or something that maybe you just need to regress the movement pattern a little bit and facilitate some rudimentary elements. And so, I mean, we have our younger therapists go through it because it is a nice starting place. It allows them to make a decision and to guide their treatment plan and really educate the client, like, this is what I'm finding, this is where we should go, and this is how I can correlate it to ultimately what you want to get back to.
Yeah,
I think it organizes their thought process, first off, right? It gives them like this funnel of stuff. So the top tier tests, right? There's a few top tier tests, and you find things that don't qualify, and you've got these breakout versions that can just kind of train your thought process down this idea of looking at, is it a movement dysfunction? Is it motor control dysfunction? Is it whatever? You start to break it down to its components. Organizing that thought process, I think, is super important. To look at it through the lens that you mentioned earlier of the fascial lines and the joint by joint approach. So seeing all those top tier tests and looking at cervical flexion, somebody whose toe hurts, doesn't really matter if you don't understand the potential force connections there. So you're talking about valgus in the squat earlier, right? Valgus in a squat. I mean, each of you guys could name about 30 things that could lead to that have nothing to do with the knee. And almost none of them would have anything to do with the knee, right? So, but if you're not looking at these, that's the whole idea of the joint by joint approach, is looking above and below and trying to find the other contributing factors to this. You won't find those if you just sit there and look at the person's knee and do the Lockmans and the valgus and the varus test. We need to assess the hip. We need to assess the ankle and the foot and these more global movement patterns if we're going to find those connections.
I think the art sometimes with that too, which is absolutely something you should do, is if you don't know what the joint by joint approach is, or anatomy trains or fascial anatomy, I think those are excellent avenues to dive down for your own knowledge set. But I think what you also have to understand is that the person that you're seeing also has a concern for a singular area of the body. So you could find a lot of different things in someone that's dysfunctional. If you get a little bit lost in the weeds and like, okay, you got some tibial external rotation deficits and your low back's hurting up here, and you only work at the foot, you're going to lose them. And so there's a benefit to finding everything and logging it in your mind, and the art is being able to store it, remember it, and then return to it when it's necessary. But in the moment, you have to address what you're finding that's relative to the body region they're seeing you for.